Humans thrive on Earth largely due to our evolutionary advantage as a social species. Our cerebral makeup allows us to understand abstract ideas and exchange thoughts and information. And our mirror neurons are what allow us to learn from each other just by watching an action being performed. Mirror neurons also give us the ability to feel empathy for one another. And this is what gave power to humans in groups over the course of time. A testament to this idea is what many consider to be the golden rule, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you were alone and visibly dying in the street, it can be assumed that somebody will help you if they see you. Most people have the empathy to feel an ethical obligation to help, because our mirror neurons allow us to relate and identify with a person in suffering. What is interesting about this philosophy is that it doesn't always scale with the number of bystanders. The study of social psychology suggests that crowds behave differently than the individuals within those crowds. Find yourself dying in the same street with heavy foot traffic, and you may learn that a lot of people will continue walking. This is known as the bystander effect. Your personal feeling of ethical obligation is diffused amongst the rest of the public, and as a consequence, observing many others walking on can heavily influence your decision to do the same. This theory has unfortunately been observed several times in history. Under a different set of circumstances, a crowd can have the volatility of beginning as a peaceful gathering to ending as a violent mob. Crowds can be unpredictable. And despite the best intentions people within a crowd may have, crowds can be a deadly force to be reckoned with. The Hillsborough disaster of 1989 being one such incident, where physics take over and lives are lost. This is why we have capacity laws for establishments. In the event of an emergency, it can very well save several lives. In the case of large public events like sports games and music festivals, there is a lot of planning and legal work that goes into it. You'll need to meet fire codes and gather countless other permits. You'll need to provide functional and sanitary restrooms. You'll need sufficient security. You'll need a medical staff and many other technicians and specialists to help keep things running smoothly. Cut corners and everything could fall apart in an instant. Tens of thousands of concert goers would attend Travis Scott's third annual music festival in Houston, Texas, where they watched conditions outside of their control unravel before their eyes. Some have been too quick to place the blame for the Astroworld tragedy on the fans. Look elsewhere with us for a moment, and let's see what we find.
When I do my shows, I be so turned, man. Like
it's another level.
I'm all about the blood. You know, we gotta turn up.
The
you
blood.
Know, it's all about rage and just like the.
Who's bleeding on stage?
I mean, you know, I'm not bleeding, but the fans are like
I feel you.
giving their bodies to
Sure.
music.
It's an experience.
The blood's pumping.
Travis Scott is one of America's hottest rappers, collaborating with names like Drake and Kendrick Lamar, doing ad deals with McDonald's, and streaming immersive concerts in Fortnite. Travis Scott has made his name as an influencer to the masses in American culture. He has built quite a reputation on live performances, where he asks crowds to rage or go home.
These motherfuckers right here, they are called ragers. Y'all over there, y'all are called scared motherfuckers. You see how these motherfuckers get out right here? They get out crazy.
I see you. Hold on, turn the lights on. Turn the lights on. I see you, but are you gonna do it? I see you, but are you gonna do it?
Travis Scott pushes his performances to their limits, and he engages with his fans to do the same. This is not to suggest that this is different from other performers in history and the reputation that they carry with them. Some performers would view damage and destruction during a performance to be the cost of putting on a great show, and rightfully so. Music fans throughout history have identified with raucous destruction in the name of rocking out.
Deaf in one ear, and a flying symbol sliced into Moon's arm.
Over the years, Travis Scott welcomes his live show's chaotic reputation with open arms. Add to that the show had actually been delayed several times. All these factors and contingencies set the scene for Scott's own headlining music festival, Astroworld. It's easy to see why so many chose to go.
There's a different type of vibe here that you only see at Astrofest, and it's gonna spread across the country. Like,
crazy vibe, crazy environment.
The mosh pits are insane. Yeah, you have to brace yourself.
This is literally the best thing that's ever happened in Houston. Thank God for Travis Scott. God bless him.
Just crazy. A lot of ragers.
He just knows how to rage. Like, he knows how to bring a show on, you know? You have to be, like, mentally prepared. Like, if you're not, you're gonna die.
When tickets for Astroworld 2021 went on sale, tickets were sold out within an hour. 100,000 passes for the two-day event, sold before the festival artist lineup was even announced. Many interested buyers would not get the opportunity to purchase a pass, and rumors quickly started spreading online that fans were going to have to climb the fences to get an opportunity to attend the event.
Good luck, my guy. He's the fence for Astroworld 2021.
It wouldn't be the first time that the festival goers had done this for one of Scott's shows, and in fact, this was acknowledged in a promotional video for Astroworld 2021, posted on the show's official Instagram.
Astroworld Fest in full swing, but now with extra security.
We want to show you what it looked like when the festival opened its doors today.
Travis Scott addresses the sold-out festival and the online rumors with a tweet that has since been deleted.
Yo, look at this shit. They're fucking jumping the fence.
Hours before the show starts, fans began crashing through gates and metal detectors to get an opportunity to see Travis for free. The turnout for the show was estimated at about 50,000, but cannot be completely certain due to the number of those who stormed the gates. And on the surface, encouraging fans to flood the venue may seem relatively harmless. In fact, some may even view it as a selfless act to want to share the special performance with as many fans as possible. The city capped the event at 50,000 concertgoers. According to Houston's fire chief Samuel Pena, NRG Park could support as many as 200,000 visitors and still meet fire codes. Despite this precaution, those 50,000 in attendance would still find themselves under fatally dense crowd conditions. The crowd who watched SZA on an adjacent stage begins to fill in a section already occupied by so many who had come early to claim a close-up spot at the main stage. A clock counts down overhead. As the clock grew closer to zero, crowd density had already swelled to a point of no return. The fates of hundreds already sealed.
This is what the Astroworld Music Festival looked like moments before Friday's tragedy.
Within Travis Scott's first song that he performed, they realized they needed to get out. They needed to leave the Astroworld Festival.
How could this possibly happen? Investigators watching videos and interviewing witnesses from a deadly music festival.
Unable to breathe, piles of people on the ground, some clawing on their clothes as a lifeline.
The people who were shorter in the crowd had more trouble breathing. Both medics and the police, they were overwhelmed because of what was going on around them.
People are recording the concert and recording me doing CPR, recording others doing CPR, then going back to recording the concert.
The Astroworld Festival, now considered one of the deadliest concerts in U.S. history.
One of the most deadly concerts in U.S. history.
This has by far been the worst I've ever seen.
Everybody seemed like they were all hands on deck to try to get the situation under control.
Stop the show! Stop the show! Stop the show!
People were suffocated, trampled. Some 300 people were hurt.
They were trapped and helpless.
I was literally holding kids in the crowd, like trying to pick them up off the ground, and everyone else around me was just dancing and partying, and this kid's eyes rolled to the back of his head.
We're having some structural issues that could be catastrophic, and we need everybody together. Folks are coming out of the crowd complaining of difficulty breathing, crushing type injuries. Seems like the crowd is compressing, from what I could tell. I was on the Delta side, and I probably saw at least 4 or 5 people pouring out of the crowd, just trying to get away from the crowd. The concert's still going on. The crowd is compressing. There's a bit of compressing. The intel we're getting is that the barricade might be compromised or being compromised. So the crowd is compressing.
There's a lot of people trampled and they're passed out at the front stage.
That crowd is super thick, super dense. If you go in there, this could possibly turn into an also rescue situation, and that makes it extremely dangerous for everybody. Be careful.
On the night of the Astroworld disaster, Travis Scott's set was being live-streamed. Hosted exclusively by Apple Music, the entire live performance was available to stream for the over 60 million Apple Music subscribers. Producers of live event broadcasts want the people at home watching the live stream to feel like they are actually there in the crowd. And to help achieve this, the roar of the crowd is captured with special microphones called NATs. In a big live video production like Astroworld, NATs capture the roar of the crowd, mixing that audio signal with the music. As the chaos unfolded, those sounds of the cheering crowd turned into cries of help, and the NAT mics could hear them screaming. And right from the get-go, Travis is encouraging movement within the crowd. 3 minutes into Travis Scott's set, watch the crowd sway. Notice that there is this part of the crowd that is pushing forward towards the stage. There is another section of the crowd here that is trying to fight this wave by pushing backwards to counteract the overwhelming force of the crowd. This type of crowd movement is a sign that a high-density, dangerous crowd has formed. People within the crowd are no longer moving of their own volition. A crowd surge can occur when a high-density crowd forms and there's an average of 6 people or more per square meter. As the crowd density increases, you lose room to move freely. As the density gets higher, you lose access to your arms. Breathing becomes difficult or impossible, as available oxygen in the air dips to dangerously low levels. High-density crowds also produce high temperatures that can dehydrate and overheat concertgoers who are packed too tightly. Take a thermal image from a bird's eye view and you can see this increase in the crowd's temperature. More visible clues that a high-density crowd has grown dangerous. The crowd takes on the properties of a liquid. This is when physics takes over. People turn from bystanders to dominoes. If you find yourself in this situation, you are likely already at the mercy of the crowd. It's a common misconception that high-density crowd fatalities are mostly due to people becoming trampled. Although people do die from being trampled, virtually all crowd deaths are due in part to compressive asphyxia. Studies of crowd pressure monitoring suggest that just 5 people pushing can produce nearly 800 pounds of force, enough to break a rib. It would only take about 1,400 pounds of pressure against the chest cavity to kill someone in 15 seconds. Extended into a time frame of 4 to 6 minutes, it would only take a force of 250 pounds to place that person's life in jeopardy. Here is an aerial view of where Travis Scott's set took place. In the center we can see the designated workstations and pathways for the staff and event workers. This green area is where the audience began to flood in. Fans left the side stage after SZA's performance. As they rushed towards Scott's stage, fans stuffed the barricaded sections closest to their point of origin, building significant pressure. As fans began to move closer to the stage, a high-density crowd was forming between these barriers, pushing the seating chart to breaking point.
No joke, about 200 plus people coming to this little compact area that we were in, and instantly we tell security, like, it's getting tight in here, it's getting squished. Security themselves tells us, just put your hands on the railing and push back with your force and whatever force you have. I tried pushing back as hard as I can. As a small guy like me, it didn't go too well. My body instantly gets shifted, and so therefore my ribs gets towards the metal gate that are bolted into the ground. So even if you were the strongest guy, you weren't moving the railing. And I look at the guard, and he looks at me, and he's like, well, I can't do nothing. I've never been in pain like that, ever. Like I said, when I was pushing against the barricade, my whole lower body hurts. My calves feel really tight from where I was just holding on for my life, I guess you could say.
There were many reports of concertgoers who could not drop their arms to the sides once they were already up. For the thousands of fans who were cheering with their hands in the air or recording video on their cell phones, they were unknowingly exposing their lungs to the risk of being crushed for the entire length of Travis Scott's set. When you have a high-density crowd of thousands, progressive crowd collapses can create an unbelievable amount of force. Here's an example from a different concert. The force of thousands crash against the barricades. Look near the stage. The barricades break and the crowd collapses. Considering how crowds have the strength to bend steel, there is little you can do if a wave of people starts to crush your body against your surroundings. If you were to find yourself in the high-density crowd between the barriers, you wouldn't have room to fall, and instead thousands of pounds of pressure would literally be squeezing the life out of you. This is seriously terrifying to think about, but it's an important discussion for live music lovers, people who go to shows. That said, look into how to protect yourself if you find yourself in a situation like this at a live show. Links are in the description. Live Nation was the host of the Astroworld Festival, and their responsibilities include maintaining a safe event for festival goers and meeting other mandatory needs. And Live Nation is aware that these types of events have happened before and that this could just as easily happen at one of their shows. In Live Nation's own event operations plan, they say, quote, "The ever-present threat of a mass casualty situation is identified as a key concern," and saying that in the event of a mass casualty incident, event personnel will, quote, "notify the local jurisdiction to advise of the nature and scope of the incident, the approximate number of casualties, best access into the area, possible staging area for incoming ambulances, and any possible hazards. When these concerts are planned at Live Nation venues and at spaces Live Nation does not own, they establish limits as to how many people can be seated at one particular section, even if it's standing room only. This is to avoid the possibility of a crowd crush event taking place. This is enforced for monetary reasons too, we can't ignore that. Obviously, Live Nation doesn't want anyone to get the privileges of an expensive ticket without paying for it. At a Live Nation show, the total number of fans are counted at the door, but staff do not do a head count of fans section by section once they're already admitted into the show. Ticket enforcement thus serves as the only safeguard against overpacked pens, like we saw at Astroworld. The only thing that could tangibly and predictably protect against these crowd crush events would be controlling that ratio of how many people are in a barricaded section. And in the case of Astroworld, it clearly looks like there are too many people within the sections closest to the stage. That may even be stating the obvious. That may even be like stating the painfully obvious. Of course, barring any facts which may come to light and disprove this, it's safe to conclude that these sections were filled past a safe level. Analysis of the video and eyewitness accounts indicate that this is when things really began taking a turn for the worse. And since all indications really point to the conclusion that nobody knew what was going on at this point, it's a little bit haunting to hear Travis command the crowd in such a way. Another song plays, and about 12 minutes into Travis's set, you hear the first screams for help. It's still hard to make out what people have begun to scream, but there seem to be desperate, pained screams among them, distressed voices loud enough to pierce the roaring crowd. If you watched that live stream and you listen close between the songs, you can hear them. Some are so loud you can hear them not just through the specialized nats. The sound actually reaches through Travis's microphone. Some are so loud, Scott's auto-tune effect has its way with them. At one point, Travis addresses a passed-out fan and stops the show. But aside from a few awkward pauses, the show wouldn't stop until every song was played.
We're waving our hands at the light boards, waving them like, help, like, please stop, like, to flash the lights at us at least to, like, show something. And nothing, zero response, nothing. Moment of silence, literally, you just hear people screaming, help, help. And then seconds later, you just hear Travis Scott just start another song, and it just a nightmare. It's a whole nightmare that just continues to play every night in my head.
Now, Houston police have asserted that at this point in the performance, the Live Nation team has been notified by HPD at Astroworld that a mass casualty event is taking place. We also have the Houston firefighters outside. They were stationed outside NRG Park. They say they never got a notification from law enforcement or anyone else on their radio channel that such an event had taken place. Ahead of Astroworld 2021, Live Nation hired the private company Paradox to provide medical services at the event, but Houston Fire Department only had radio communication with Harris County Emergency Corps. This meant that Paradox would communicate with Harris County Emergency Corps, but that information would have to be relayed to the Houston Fire Department. The chain of communication at this point seems inefficient. Questions remain as to whether this protocol cost officials time that may have saved a life. With so many players, it's hard to describe what happened at Astroworld 2021 without mentioning Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Employees for the event say they were understaffed and undertrained, and the medical responders were going into the high-density crowd against their own safety protocol to try to get a handle on a situation that was much bigger than them. And all the while, thousands of unaware concert-goers cheer and dance as Travis Scott continues his set, who is also seemingly unaware that a mass casualty event had unfolded.
It wasn't really until minutes until the press conference until I figured out exactly what happened. You know, anytime you can hear something like that, you want to stop the show. You want to make sure, you know, fans get the proper attention they need, you know. And anytime I could see anything like that, I did, you know. You know, I stopped it like a couple times to just make sure everybody was okay. And I just really just go off the, you know, the fans' energy as a collective, you know, call and response. And I just didn't hear that. You know, I got music, I got my in-ears, but I just didn't hear that, you know.
We were doing CPR on the back of carts, trying to get out of that crowd. People were jumping on top of the carts. They were pulling us off people. They thought it was a joke. This is something I'll have nightmares about for the rest of my life. I think my team is extremely broken up about it. Seeing so many young people getting CPR at one time is just something no one should have to go to.
Where I was at, we had 3, then 4, then 5 people in cardiac arrest. We had 1 defibrillator, 1 stretcher, and 1 bag valve mask.
This has happened in the music industry in our generation. So, I mean, this isn't like, oh, wow, didn't see this coming. This has happened. We have seen this occur.
It is a perfect storm to have a catastrophe. And the policies and procedures that are in place right now, they're just not sufficient. And these organizers know it.
I was hired a few days prior to the festival. The day before Astroworld, I completed the orientation and the training for the process. The training for that was extremely brief. It was an open book test. The teacher, he was actually giving us the answers as we were going through the books ourselves and trying to hurry up and fill out the answers. This was the night before Astroworld, and it was already approaching 11 p.m. As we walked the perimeter, I just knew that we were definitely understaffed in every sense of the word. So I knew immediately that if 2 people decided to rush the gate, then it was over with.
All of the other security officers who were also hired were also not prepared. He basically says him and his family just showed up to this concert and were given security vests and basically given the job on the spot.
I believe that if we were all prepared the right way, that stuff wouldn't have happened the way it did, you know, the way it did. And honestly, even the people, the amount of people that passed and went unconscious, you know, the amount of injuries could have been avoided.
Could the tragedy have been avoided? Many who attended the show say yes. Since the date of this recording, hundreds have filed lawsuits against Live Nation, Travis Scott, Drake, NRG Stadium, and others involved with the event. The estates of the dead joining others, alive but scarred, placing blame and seeking damages. This number will likely grow as more victims come forward. Billions now soon to be hanging in the balance, and ultimately time will tell. There weren't a whole lot of live events in 2020. That leads to Live Nation now, who furloughed and laid off a bunch of workers. The recent shifts in the workforce have left Live Nation unable to attract applicants needed to run safe shows, especially with a jab mandate. Live Nation is probably embarrassed. The first video that everybody is showing is all those people tripping over each other at a security gate. That's the first gate you get through to go to the show, and you know, obviously those were metal detectors that they knocked over, so there's not a whole lot of security going on. It just seems apparent that the show was not staffed from the get-go. And while I'm sure concert promoters are hurting due to a dismal 2020 fiscal year, it's actually started to turn around. A lot more money is being infused into the industry. Just days before the Astroworld casualty event, Live Nation posted revenues of $2.7 billion. In the same quarter last year, it was $184 million with an M. The boss of Live Nation actually wrote investors with the good news. He called it a, quote, roaring era for concerts and other live events, going on to say, "I remain more convinced than ever on the power and potential of live entertainment and the strength of our position."
We've got 30 amphitheater tours that are starting this week across the country, full capacity. We've got Rolling Loud next week in Miami at 200,000 people, Lollapalooza. So about 10, 15 festivals on sale that'll happen this summer.
How different do you think concert going is going to be in the future? Do you think we'll see permanent changes either to the user experience, to costs, to capacities?
You know, the beautiful part is that 2-hour show, we saw it during COVID. It's just something that's not duplicatable. It's a magical moment. The good news is this show is kind of back to what it's always been. That's 2 hours of magic in that venue. So we don't see anything changing. It doesn't have to change. The show is magical.
One of the best performing stocks in the S&P this week
it's looking great right now. And what we're seeing now is actually that we're comping ahead of 2019. So we're no longer having conversations about how are we performing relative to a reopening coming out of COVID, but we're now focused on how are we outperforming where we stood in 2019. The third quarter was Ticketmaster's best quarter ever, highest profit quarter ever, because the on sales for our concerts next year started happening earlier. And we're looking that Q4 of this year could be a record quarter for Ticketmaster again, in terms of just the volume of shows.
What words would you use to characterize the attitude of both the organizers and the performers?
I don't give an F. It was beyond a cavalier attitude. It was really just a we just don't care. It's a profit-driven margin. That's essentially all we see is profit margin, because the staffing was not there. I don't know the proposal that they handed in order to get the permit, but I want to look at the actual proposal that was handed in, 60 plus pages, and the actual plan that was actually there in play at the concert with the amount of personnel that was there.
As the industry's leader, Live Nation will always stand the risk of disasters like this happening at one of their events. Until the appropriate staffing and preparation is made for each event, this will remain the reality for Live Nation. Whether this cost is at the expense of the customer's ticket prices or the company's recently record-breaking profit margins, changes will likely be made swiftly. If these current lawsuits start to make a large enough impact on their financial gains, Live Nation and its peers may find themselves incentivized towards reform as well. We have now seen and heard stories from the ground, but are certain nothing could compare to the anguish and heartbreak of living through that tragedy. Given all this, the fans can't be found to be at fault here. They were thrown into a crowd they could not understand, one where mere physics decided their fate. There's no denying that the events at Astroworld could be the igniter of a fundamental change in the way live music is consumed en masse. Can it sustain the momentum needed to create or otherwise incentivize a new status quo for live show organizations? That has yet to be seen.
Well, they have to stop the show because there's people trample and they're not breathing.
You guys are doing well. Take a breath. Everyone's doing a good job. Now listen, what I need is for people to get things under control at the medical tent. HFD's been advised. They are listening to our channel, and they're pulling people in to come and help, okay? Help is coming. Just take a deep breath and relax. We'll work through this.
Every so often, we see a new precedent being set despite the bystander effect. Instead of walking past the anguish of another, a would-be bystander becomes a Samaritan, and a new line of thinking is formed. How many still did what they could, trying anything to help? How many of those who did knew it was impossible to save a life, but tried anyway? Ask yourself, would you have done the same?
Kathy helped administer CPR to the boy. 18-year-old Michael Bishop also performed CPR for many patients in his area near the stage after he says security pleaded for help.
I was able to resuscitate 2 people from unconsciousness.
I remember there was a girl at one point who was holding my hand. I didn't know this girl whatsoever, but she held my hand. I held her hand as long as I could.
And a just good Samaritan that happened to be there lifted me up. And they just crowd surfed my unconscious body over to the security guard. Essentially what had happened was the security guard dropped me off and sat down and then went and ran back to get more people in and out. And I told him, I was like, I'm an ICU nurse. I really hope that at least one person that I was helping made it. Just at least one.
She was pulled to safety and just 3 weeks out of nursing school, went right into action.
The instinct would be to run away. What made you turn around?
I just knew that I needed to help.
She worked to revive him for 40 minutes, begging a paramedic for help.
I wouldn't be here without her. I mean, I literally owe her my life.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
We were there as the Once Strangers reunited for the first time since the tragedy.
How many people did you try to help?
I helped 3 others, but it's kind of like a prioritization thing. You have to move on to the ones who can survive. And this is it. These are the people who survive.
As humans, we should do to others as we wish for them to do for us.